The next day, the midwife had come in, and first she asked us, does he look like any of your children? And I said, well, he looks like our oldest son, but with Down syndrome. And her jaw sort of dropped, and she said, oh, so you suspect it too? And she turned to Jim and said, how do you feel about that? And Jim shrugged and said, he's just as wonderfully made as all our other children. And that sort of set the way we went about it from the very beginning.
The goal of the Best You podcast is to allow you to feel confident about what you need to do, why you need to do it, and how to do it in order to get closer and closer to your best you. All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Best You podcast. I am really excited today to be joined by the one and only Jim and Kelsi Romero. Jim and Kelsi, just want to start off by saying thanks so much for spending the time with me today.
No problem. Glad we could be here.
Yeah, so like I said, I kind of became aware of y'all's story a little over a month or so ago now, and I thought this would be such a unique episode and diving further into all the things that y'all have learned, your family has learned, and a lot of people listening are going to have already probably known your story from having followed you, especially the people that listen here in Nashville. But to kind of give a really brief overview, back in July of 2014, you guys had your sixth child, Colt, and he was born with an extra chromosome, and you quickly realized that he had Down syndrome, and it essentially kind of changed your life forever, right? And then a few years later, in January of 2017, you guys adopted Nick from an orphanage in Ukraine. And you guys have been essentially documenting kind of the experience of raising them ever since. So seven total kids. And so basically the way I want to start is, what did y'all's emotions, feelings, conversations look like with each other after Colt was originally born back in 2014? And what did that look like from a parenting standpoint and navigating that situation?
Well, when he was first born, we didn't know right away that he had Down syndrome. So it was the first night, actually, he hadn't cried at all. And through the night, and I started noticing, mainly it was the almond-shaped eyes that I started noticing. And I started Googling what the markers of Down syndrome were. And so long story short, I kind of had decided, once I saw that he has brush field strokes on his irises. They're like sparkles on his eyes. So that was the main marker I saw, that along with his almond-shaped eyes, that I thought that night, after looking at it all, I thought, I think he has Down syndrome. So in the middle of the night, I said to Jim, do you think he has Down syndrome? And his response was, oh, really? I don't know. And the next day, the midwife had come in, and I saw her. Well, first she asked us, does he look like any of your children? And I said, well, he looks like our oldest son, but with Down syndrome. And her jaw sort of dropped, and she said, oh, so you suspect it too? And I had noticed she was looking for all the same markers that I've been looking for. And she turned to Jim and said, how do you feel about that? And Jim shrugged and said, he's just as wonderfully made as all our other children. And that sort of set the way we went about it from the very beginning. It was just, he's wonderful. God doesn't make mistakes. He's wonderfully made. And so from the beginning, we've just had that we've known that about Colt, and we've always thought he's wonderful. Of course, you get nervous because there's so many doctor's appointments that once you find out they have Down syndrome, that you have to do testing and for the heart and health and various things that you get nervous about just because you love them so much and you don't want anything for your child bad. But from the beginning, we just had thought of him like all the rest of our children. We celebrated him just like the rest of them. So
yeah, that's great. And so, Jim, I'm kind of curious as to, a lot of people, when faced with a traditionally seen as maybe a negative situation, they don't handle it very well, but they learn from it and they wish they would have responded differently, and hopefully they do so moving forward. However, you had become a person who was able to handle that, again, quote, troubling news or difficult news with a lot of grace and in a way that a lot of people would like to handle it. What do you think you had done personal development wise, personal growth wise, for you to be able to kind of be so graceful and calm and accept it so well right in the moment?
Sure. I mean, I'll start off by saying there's many things in life that I've probably reacted wrong to and, not handled with grace. And Kelsi, I'm sure can tell you many of stories, whether it be as a husband or as a father. But I will say, as someone who, has a strong faith in Christ and understands that everything that is set before me, both in my past, presently, and whatever he has for the future, is part of his plan. And so I knew, like every one of our children, like Kelsi said, is a gift from God. And because of that, he has gifted us with a great responsibility and a great gift in Colt. And we are to raise him up the same way we do all the rest of our children. But I think going back to your original question, I never, in this particular situation, I always had a great peace about it. I didn't really think about the stuff that maybe a lot of people might jump to, and rightly so. Like Kelsi said, there's many things that come along with a child with special needs that I don't blame people for being nervous or worrying about the future and what it looks like. But I felt a great peace about it from the beginning, and felt like and know that God will has a plan for us and has a plan for Colt, and we're just here on earth for a short time, and during that time, it's our responsibility as his parents to raise him up like we would any one of our other children.
That's awesome. That's great. So when did you guys decide / how did you decide / why did you decide to start, forming this social media account and start documenting the experience?
Well, I guess we just started wanting to share the beauty in Down syndrome. We just, we saw the way so many people looked at it, and it was so wrong as far as not even just offensive, because we're not offended easily. I understand that I didn't know anything about Down syndrome before we had Colt. I knew nothing. I didn't even know the proper way to say it. I didn't know if it was plus a chromosome or minus a chromosome. So we just thought, just to show people the beauty of it, to educate people, to show them that there's no reason to ever say, "Oh, sorry, I'm so sorry," when they find out that you have a child with Down syndrome. That when we announced Colt's birth, we specifically wrote a letter to share with everyone, letting them know that we're thrilled with Colt. We're thrilled with the gift of his extra chromosome, and explaining why we were, because we didn't want anyone to hear the diagnosis and tell us we're sorry for you. So, because we're not sorry, he's a gift, and we didn't. So that's sort of that desire to share that with others kind of just led me to start sharing on Instagram openly, but I never really expected it. I was just sharing the beauty of Colt too. And I never really I didn't know much about Instagram anyway. My sister had to help me every step of the way with everything I wanted to do on it. And just started sharing.
Yeah. I think that's awesome. Anytime there is something like this that happens, it's really important for not to people think to immediately jump to it's a bad situation. It's just a situation that is, and you define the meaning towards it. And you guys define that it was a blessing and an opportunity for you guys as well. I want you to talk to a little bit how your kids have grown from the standpoint of having two younger siblings with Down syndrome. What do you feel as the biggest pieces of growth, or the things that they've learned, or the things that they've developed, or the skills that they've acquired through having two kids with Down syndrome, or two siblings with Down syndrome?
I would start off by saying, Colt and Nick are the two youngest in the family. So the rest of them being older than those two have, starting with Luke, have had the opportunity that each time a sibling has come into the picture, just the opportunity to care for them and to love them. And so when Colt came into the picture and was born, and then later on when we adopted Nick, just their genuine love for the two boys, and the way they care about them, the way they protect them, But more importantly, just the way they go about their daily life. We homeschool, so they're all around each other every single day of every single week, and they interact, and they learn to know and understand that every single one of them has strengths and weaknesses, and none of them are perfect, and to learn how to interact with each other has been huge. To love each other and to support each other, because that's what Colt and Nick will always need, throughout life. But I think regardless, we all need that. We all need to know and understand how to love each other and to support each other, not just as a family, but in a broader sense. And so I think that's been a huge factor for our family and for the kids specifically. I know Kelsi will talk to that more.
Well, no, to the kids, it's not, they don't think about Colt and Nick with Down syndrome. They just think it's their brothers, their little brothers. Yeah. And of course that because of their Down syndrome, they're slower in other areas, or they have their own differences, but so do every single child does. So they just see it as, oh, that's their differences. That's another person's differences. That's their strengths. And they don't see it as Down syndrome. They just see it as their little brothers. And I think out of that, they see others that way too. They don't, any special needs. I think it takes the fear away from saying the wrong thing or how do you act with this person. It's just this person with different strengths and different weaknesses. It's nothing. They're not the diagnosis. They're just a person and they have different strengths and weaknesses like all of us do. And so it takes that fear of approaching or helping out or taking care of. You don't really think about it.
Yeah. I'm interested from a parenting standpoint. I feel like a common thing that can sometimes happen with kids is when there is and I know this just from other couples. I don't have any kids myself. Sometimes when there is an only child for a little bit and they get all the attention, and then there's a newborn into the picture, and that newborn gets a little bit more of the attention. Sometimes the younger child who was used to being the only one gets a little bit jealous. And so I'm just kind of interested from a parenting standpoint. Did you guys ever have a conversation around how do we make sure that we don't make these other 5 kids feel like they're not seen enough and feel like they're not given enough attention because we have to maybe give a little bit more attention to the 2 with Down syndrome? Did you guys ever strategize as to how to make sure that wasn't the case and didn't happen?
Yes, I'd say yes and no. Yes, in the fact that with all of our kids, so starting with Ryan, our second, that's the fear is, well, it's been Luke for, 2 years, and now here comes a newborn. But I think we have always been open, talked about it with each other. And I guess you would say strategize, but just be proactive with understanding and knowing that yes, there's a newborn there that requires attention, but that doesn't mean that the sole focus needs to be on that. And teaching the kids too, also that it's not about self. It's not, it's unself. You need to be unselfish about this, and just create in them a love and desire to be part of this process and helping. Obviously, Kelsi's done a great job with all the kids, and they're all involved in raising up the next youngest in line. So there's really not time for them to sit there and mope and think about woe is me because this baby or this child's getting more attention than I am. I don't think they would even if you pulled them aside and asked them privately, I don't think they would ever feel like there was a time in their life where they felt like one child was favored over the other. So, I'd say, yes and no to that. We've tried to be proactive, but I think it takes care of itself with a large family.
Yeah. And I think some of it is seen a lot more of Colt and Nick because they're out there, but so much behind the scenes that isn't seen from the other standpoint of, that we don't put out there simply, because of different reasons for their privacy. And what we've said is people have a view of Colt and Nick that our purpose is to try to dispel those views that people automatically have. So our purpose in sharing them is to take away these preset notions, these horrible views of Down syndrome that are leading to, 70 to 100% abortion rates in them, to kill those views, those stereotypes. Whereas, with the others, people, we want them to create the views of themselves out there. And so if they want to be out there, that's fine. That's them. But we feel like our job for Colt and Nick is to kind of help their future, their world with the view of Down syndrome. So,
yeah, no, that's great. That's powerful. You guys have been married for 22, 23?
It'll be 23 years in September.
Don't ask questions like that on the spot.
Yeah, you guys both look at each other like, would you know? No, but been married almost 23 years in September now, and you have 7 kids, 2 of which have Down syndrome. Obviously, that is a huge time commitment, and you now have the blog and the social media account, Kelsi and Jim. You work as well, and how do you guys prioritize the time for yourselves to kind of grow as a couple outside of just being parents of the 7?
I mean, I would say we're not. We were not your typical, obviously family, but we're not even, I would say, your typical couple in that, for good or bad, I guess people would say, we don't do a lot of, time where it's just Kelsi and I, and we have become better at that over the years, just grabbing coffee now that a lot of the kids are old enough to stay home and babysit. But for years, we never had a babysitter. We never went on what you would, a date night unless maybe a relative was in town and they babysat for us or something like that. So
we had to get creative. The kids are in bed, so set up something at the house, or just getting creative with different things. And now, like he said, once a week, going for coffee, setting a time to go for coffee, or
because too, the older the kids get, the less alone time you have. There's always someone in the room. There's always someone listening, and so we think it's important to have those conversations where it's just the two of us, where we, because if you save it for at night, I mean, we're both tired. We've had long days, and so just creating that space and that time is obviously, it's huge, and it's important to our marriage, and to just being able to speak openly and freely with each other and not have, seven kids listening in. So,
and we're both very early risers. So we get up at about 4:30 and do our Bible study, have our Bible study time. And the kids are early risers too, but not that early. So we beat them and get that time in the morning as well.
Cool. That's good. So I'm going to ask each of you kind of a hypothetical question about the other. Kelsi, I'll have you go first. What do you think is different about the version of Jim who he is now compared to the version of Jim that he would be if you guys did not have a couple of children with Down syndrome?
We'll be back to the interview in just a second. But first, I wanted to share a quick testimonial from a past participant of the 10-week transformation program. I started running the 10WT in the beginning of 2020, and I've had over 150 people and counting go through it, and they've seen amazing results both inside and out. If you're inspired to join after listening to the testimonial, then go to nickcarrier.com to learn more. We'll get back to the episode in just a minute, but first, here's what they had to say.
My name is Ashley Reed. I joined the 10-week program really because I wanted to lose a little bit more weight and gain strength. I accomplished both of those things. I'm definitely stronger, and I've also made some incredible friends in the process, which I didn't expect. You're just silly if you don't do this.
Well, I think just as everything we get in life that God gives us, it's to grow us closer to Him and in our faith. And I think that Colt's birth did just that. I mean, grew us in our faith and grew us in letting go of trying to control things. I mean, so many areas that we've gone along the way have taught us that when we think we have control of things and then something happens and we realize we have to trust God. And so I think I would say he's grown in his faith, just like everything that's come our way. And then really the adoption of Nick, I think to see him really let go and just trust God through that, as far as providing the means for that, providing all the things, all the stuff that we just really had to trust God in through every step of the way, and realizing that if we follow and obey God, and he's going to take care of everything along the way. And so that was a huge growing point for him and me, but I'm answering for him, growing point for him in seeing that, and seeing, we said that if we did this and if we obeyed, we'd have to be prepared for whatever hard thing comes along the way, whatever doubts come along the way, because he's a real planner. So he wants to make sure all the ducks are in a row, every penny is lined up, and we're all taken care of. And with adoption, especially adoption in Ukraine, you can't do that. There's zero way of lining it up and making sure. We just had to trust. And he likes to be a little more set and planned in every step of the way. And so we did, and just to see God's provision and his hand in that every step of the way, I think really, really grew his faith and trust in every, for the next situation, whatever that might be that comes along. So.
Yeah. And so Jim, kind of the same thing for her. What do you think is different about her, like as a mother now, having had two Down syndrome children compared to maybe who she would have been if you guys never would have had two Down syndrome kids?
Yeah, I mean, I think with Kelsi, and I'll give you sort of two sides of that. I think whether Colt and Nick did not come along, I think that Kelsi would not be any different from a standpoint of who she is as a mother and as a wife. I think she is solid in her foundation and her faith, and that just regardless of Colt and Nick being in the picture, I think as a wife and a mother, that's going to carry her through any and every situation. It has and will continue to. I think though that with Colt and Nick in the picture, and just Kelsi's heart and a desire to share within the Down syndrome community and again bring light to that, has not only done that, but it's opened a door for her to share her faith, which has been huge. Just to be there for other moms who are going through what she went through. And again, everyone handles it differently, but God opened a door for Kelsi that would not have been there had Colt not been born and had we not adopted Nick. So she can talk to it as a biological parent to someone with Down syndrome, and as an adoptive mom, and what that looks like, and the amount of opportunity that she gets to speak into the lives of these other women who have reached out to her across the country and throughout the world, to be honest with you, that's been the biggest blessing, I think, regardless of, anything else that Instagram has or does, or the good and the bad of social media. That has been a huge blessing for her to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's great. And you guys have talked a little bit now about the obviously the adoption of Nick, and so I think a lot of people go through very similar situations, not in the sense that they might adopt a Down syndrome kid from Ukraine, but they go into similar situations in the sense that there's a lot of uncertainty, whether it's I'm going to leave a job and take a risk, or I'm going to, any kind of risky, uncertain situation that somebody might make. Maybe it's making a move across the country or something like that. What is your message to somebody who deep down probably knows that whatever risky situation or uncertain situation that they might be stepping into, deep down, they probably know it's right, but then there's going to be that voice in their head giving them all the potentially valid reasons why not to do it and why it is a really risky situation, what's your message to that person to maybe continue to step forward and take that action and be courageous?
I mean, I would say do it and surround yourself with people who will support you, who won't be negative toward that, who won't be the first one to jump off the bandwagon. Because like Kelsi's already said, just because someone does act on that doesn't mean it's going to be a smooth ride. Doesn't mean it's going to, it's going to be easy. It may be, in the end, harder than it would have been if they hadn't taken that step of faith or that leap into whatever, situation has presented itself where they are sort of doubting whether they need to do that or not. Like Kelsi's mentioned, I am, at one point in time, and obviously I'm far better about this now. I would never take a risk in anything, whether it be job, financial. I mean, I always wanted to have everything planned out and, have option A, B, and C ready to go in case something went wrong. But that's, at the end of the day, yes, it's good to have a plan, but, you can't live life just sitting back and then doubting and wondering what would have been if you hadn't, taken that step of faith. So I would say, by all means, if that's what your gut and your heart is telling you, you need to do it, and find, whether it be a spouse or a close friend, someone who will be there for you and support you through that process.
That's solid. Yeah, I think a support system is so key, because I think oftentimes, and I bring it up because I know a lot of people who I work with, whether it's clients or friends or peers, are always having these sorts of situations. And oftentimes when you can talk out the situation with somebody else, you might realize that, okay, like it's maybe not as risky as I'm building it up to be in my head, and it might not be as scary as it is in my head. And sometimes it takes a third party perspective to reveal that to you.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. It, when it's all said and done, you've really thought it out, and a lot of times people aren't even willing to open up to someone, and so they keep that hidden. And like you just said, it's when you can actually open up and talk to someone about it and explain the situation, and they can be a sounding board for you and a voice of reason, and someone who will be an encourager to you as you take that step of faith into whatever you're going to do.
Kelsi, have I understood correctly that you homeschool them?
That's correct.
Woo, man, tell you what, that sounds crazy and hectic. Talk to me a little bit about the decision to do it first, and then kind of insight as to practically how that works.
Well, there's never a dull moment around here, but we started back with our oldest. So back when he was probably around 5 or 6, we would never have thought we'd homeschool. We thought people were crazy who homeschooled, and it really wasn't mainstream then, as it is now. At least where we are, it's very mainstream. I mean, especially after COVID, everyone homeschools, right. But not everyone, but a lot more people homeschool. It's right. Become very normal. So, but back when Luke was 6, so that was like 2000. Wait, when was that? 2010, yeah. Probably around 2010. It was, and we were in a different state, which homeschooling wasn't as popular. It was, even mentioning it was very strange, and we kind of thought it was strange. But actually, what really sealed the deal for us on that was we heard Bodie Baucham. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he was at a conference and he was speaking on it, and we just realized that what are our priorities in raising our children, and base our decision off our priorities and our goals for how we want to raise our children, and what is most important in raising our children. And to us personally, it's raising them in the Lord, and in every aspect of not categorizing different or just separating into sections, parts of their lives, but it's all about that. And so we decided that homeschooling would be a way to do that. And we also love the fact that we get, as they've grown, and now with Colt and Nick, we see just the beauty in being able to really focus on each child's strengths, being able to develop those. And every child is so different. I mean, we've raised our kids, we feel like the same, and they have the same parents that we haven't changed. And yet they're all so completely different in their gifts and the things they love to do, in their weaknesses. I mean, some are great in one areas and another will struggle in that. And so homeschooling has really allowed us to focus and build up their strengths and spend extra time working on their weaknesses that they need, that they might not get. I don't know. We've never done anything but homeschooling. So anyway, we that's what kind of sealed the deal. We've been homeschooling ever since. Haven't really thought twice. But yeah, it is. I mean, every homeschool parent doubts themselves. I don't know a homeschool mom that doesn't think that they're going to screw up their kids royally. But when you see the fruit of it, it's very rewarding. And our oldest now is going into his last year of his senior year, and he's going to be halfway through his college courses by the time he's done with high school. So
Wow.
It's just, we've loved it. I don't feel like I'm good at it. I don't know any homeschool mom that does. So I don't feel like I would be someone to put up as a model at all. But by God's grace, something's happening with the kids. So we enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, you guys are very humble. I'm sure as Jim would probably say as well, that I'm sure you're a great homeschool teacher. But I want to get down here towards the end. Before I ask the last question, I just want to acknowledge you guys for having kind of done the work on yourselves and building such a solid foundation. So when this situation did present itself, y'all were ready. So many people only start preparing when a situation like that happens, and they only start working on themselves when a situation like that happens. And you guys had already done a lot of work on yourself so that the foundation was set so that you could handle the situation with such grace. And I want to also acknowledge you guys for, it's not a Down syndrome kid. It's Colt, it's Nick, and they have their differences and their strengths and their weaknesses just like anybody else does. And that's such a great way to see somebody else. And that's a great way to see every person is an individual, and they have their strengths and their weaknesses. And for you guys to acknowledge that and celebrate that, I think is super powerful and obviously very influential to a lot of people.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course. Well, I know a lot of people on here probably already follow you guys to a certain extent, but if you guys don't, make sure you follow them on Instagram at Downright Wonderful. You can also go to their blog at downrightwonderful.net. I was probably spending a couple of days ago, maybe 15, 20 minutes going through the videos of Colt and Nick. It's hilarious. I think I love when they're chasing the chickens, anytime they're singing, or it's awesome. It's super fun to watch and just see how joyous they are, and to see how joyous it makes y'all and the rest of your family as well. It's pretty special. So last question is for both of you guys. I'll start off with Jim this time, since the last duo question I started with Kelsi is the last question that I ask everybody. Is that I believe that getting closer to the best version of yourself is both a constant journey. I don't think we ever get to that best version. And I also think it's a unique journey. I think the way that I get closer to the best version of myself and the way that I define the best version of myself is going to be a little bit different than the way that you guys get there and you guys define it. So the last question is for each of you personally. If there are 3 things that you could currently do, or 3 things that you could currently work on to get closer to that best version of Jim and Kelsi or Romero that you could possibly be, then what are those 3 things that you could currently do or currently work on?
Well, I think for me, and I know Kelsi would say the same, it starts with my relationship with Christ. And so through that, as I continue to grow and grow in a likeness more like Christ, then that in turn will allow me to become a better husband and a better father. And I'd even go a step further and say a better employee. I think in every aspect of your life, like you just said, you're never going to reach. If anybody ever thinks they've reached, the top of pyramid when it comes to anything, then they're probably very far from that. So I think it's acknowledging that we can always grow. And for me, in that order, I think is how I will continue to move forward. And there might be setbacks in each one of those areas, but at the end of the day, it's then having someone next to me, and in my case, my wife, who can let me know that and help me then to continue in that forward movement in those areas.
Yeah, and I would just reiterate this exact same thing. I mean, to me, we just call that the sanctification process, and it's a constant process. And there's going to be hard things that come my way. I know that. We know that right now, as we're in the smooth time, you're just growing, because you're going to hard times come. It's never, and those are to grow us. And so just a constant growing, so that makes me a better wife, a better mom, a better friend, and just growing in my faith. And so as those hard times come, I will react in faith and love. And I know that there's going to be lots of screw ups along the way, and I grow from those, and I'm thankful for grace. But I'd say the same. I'd have to say the same thing. I can't. I mean, and that kind of encompasses everything. It's just a process.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Well, those were definitely great things. Like you said, is all encompassing. When you work on kind of strengthening your faith, it affects all the areas of your life. But as I said, guys, make sure you go follow them on Instagram if you don't already at Downright Wonderful. It's such a joy to see how much true happiness that Colt and Nick bring you guys, and bring the rest of the family, and obviously the rest of everybody who follows y'all's journey. So make sure you guys go follow them at Downright Wonderful. And that's all we got today. Jim and Kelsi, really appreciate the time.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Nick. It's been a pleasure.
Of course.